To replace an electronic entry door lock, you must first remove the 4 screws securing the inner latch to the mechanism. The first 2 screws will be located just below the deadbolt knob, and the second pair of screws will be towards the edge of the door beside the door handle. Once the screws are removed, gently pull back the inner faceplate and disconnect the battery wire harness between the inner plate and the door mechanism. Next, you'll need to remove the door latch mechanism and outer faceplate. To do this, you will need to first remove the 2 screws securing it in place. These are located on the side of the door frame. Once the screws are removed, pivot the outer faceplate away from the door while slowly sliding it back out of the door frame. Before installing the new lock, notice that there are 2 sets of keys zip-tied to it. Using a knife, cut the zip ties and place the keys somewhere safe. Do not leave them inside the unit, as this is a good way to lock yourself out. Once the keys are removed, you will need to separate the inner and outer faces of the lock for installation. Begin by removing the same 4 screws on the inner plate that you removed on the old lock. Then, while holding the halves together, remove the 2 screws that will secure the door lock to the door frame. Once the screws are removed, gently separate the 2 halves and then disconnect your battery wire harness. With the 2 halves separated, you can now begin physically installing the lock. Pivot the outer half into position the same way you took out the old lock. Line up the screw holes on the outside and install the 2 screws securing it to the door frame. Leave the screws slightly loose until the end of installation. This will make installing the inner half easier. Plug in the battery wire harness and position the inner half of the door lock against the outer half. Once it is lined up, begin securing your 2 faceplates together with the same 4 screws you removed before. Leave the screws a bit loose again to allow for adjustment. Adjust the door handle until it is square to the door, and then tighten your 4 screws on the inner faceplate, and finally the 2 screws on the side of the door frame. Once everything is installed, verify that the door handle and locks are operating correctly. Be sure to have the keys in your hand prior to testing the locks to prevent locking yourself out of the unit.